Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So it's the summer, so if you hear a humming in the back of my video, it is my AC because it is literally too hot for me to film without it right now. But today we are going to be talking about cults. This is a video I've wanted to do for a while. I only have 5 books that I'm going to talk about, just because there are 5 books that I definitely want to recommend. I've read a lot of horror novels about cults, but these are the ones that I think are really worth your time going through. And if you have any suggestions for amazing horror novels that focus on cults, please leave them down in the comments below. I love reading about cults. I think they're fascinating and so scary, especially because they really do exist in real life. A lot of these are crazy and supernatural, but they are very much a real thing in the world, and it's a fascinating kind of mentality that people end up having when they end up in a cult or when they escape a cult. So I find it a very fascinating subject matter. So we're going to talk about fictional ones that I think are really creepy and really well done. And some of these books I actually haven't really spoken about that much on my channel, so very excited to dive into that. Alright, so first up, we're going to talk about Devil's Creek by Todd Keisling. This is always, I feel like, on everybody's you have to read this book about cults list, and it made it onto mine. Todd Keisling is an author that I've really not read very much from. I read this and I read Scanlines, which is very intense, and I know that this was just recently reprinted, but I think this is a fantastic novel, and I really hope that he is releasing more very soon, or that I can find more places to pick him up. A lot of times I feel like he does more indie releases or small batch releases, so I don't always know when his work is coming out, but I really was impressed with Devil's Creek. I'll read the back of the book. Give us that old-time religion. About 15 miles west of Stoufford, Kentucky, lies Devil's Creek. According to local legend, there used to be a church out there, home to the Lord's Church of Holy Voices, a death cult where Jacob Masters preached the gospel of a nameless God. And like most legends, there's truth buried among the roots and bones. In 1983, the church burned down following a mass suicide. Among the survivors were Jacob's 6 children and their grandparents, who've banded together to defy their former minister. Dubbed the Stoufford Six, these children grew up amid scrutiny and ridicule, but their infamy has faded over the last 30 years. Now their ordeal is all but forgotten, and Jacob Masters is nothing more than a scary story told around campfires. For Jack Tremblay, one of the 6, memories of that fateful night have fueled a successful art career and a lifetime of nightmares. When his grandmother Imogen dies, Jack returns to Stoufford to settle her estate. What he finds waiting for him are secrets Imogen kept in his youth, secrets about his father and the church, secrets that can no longer stay buried. The roots of Jacob's buried God run deep, and within the heart of Devil's Creek, something is beginning to stir. So this book is really interesting. It's told from the perspective of a couple different characters, mainly all survivors, the 6 in this. And it does a really good job of balancing cosmic horror with these kind of realities of being in a cult in a small town in America. And what I like about this is I am usually not a huge fan of cosmic horror, but I think the way that it is done and introduced and kind of put forward to the reader in the story really worked for me. And this worked as one of those cosmic stories where the horror is this kind of existential dread, but it is also very much rooted within the story from the beginning and doesn't kind of come out of nowhere at the end as this all-encompassing moment. And I really loved that. I really loved the tone of this. The main characters I found very compelling and very likable and very realistic. They all kind of come back from their big successful careers back to this kind of very small town with a lot of closed minds and a lot of preconceived notions on their set religion. So I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was very scary. I thought it was very well done. And again, when you take something that's got cosmic entities in it and you can make me enjoy it, that's a big deal because I really don't like cosmic horror. Okay, next up, I've been speaking about this book a lot on my channel recently. It did just come out a couple months ago, but this is Rachel Harrison's Black Sheep. This is her latest novel. Rachel Harrison is one of those authors, and I say this every time I talk about her, that I hate every single character ever that she writes, and yet her tone and voice and prose and storytelling is just so amazing and compelling and relatable and fun that I have to read everything that she writes, because even though I don't like the people she's writing about, the way she writes about them I think is fantastic. I'm gonna read the inside flap for this one. Nobody has a normal family, but Vesper Wrights is truly something else. Vesper left home at 18 and never looked back, mostly because she was told that leaving the staunchly religious community she grew up in meant she couldn't return. But then an envelope arrives on her doorstep. Inside is an invitation to the wedding of Vesper's beloved cousin Rosie. It's to be hosted at the family farm. Have they made an exception to the rule? it wouldn't be the first time Vesper's been given special treatment. Is the invite a sweet gesture, an olive branch, a trap? Doesn't matter. Something inside her insists she'd go to the wedding, even if it means returning to the toxic environment she escaped, even if it means reuniting with her mother, Constance, a former horror film star and forever ice queen. When Vesper's homecoming exhumes a terrifying secret, she's forced to reckon with her family's beliefs and her own crisis of faith in this deliciously sinister novel that explores the way family ties can bind us as we struggle to find our place in the world. The cult in this book is so funny. And that's a weird thing to say, but Rachel Harrison has this like sense and this way with dark humor, and it is just so funny. And when you realize what the cult is critiquing, it's just, in my personal opinion, just so much funnier. It's very much about religious hypocrisy, and like putting the ideas and concepts of a religion and a signature leader over your own self and like your own well-being, along with the well-being of those around you. And it's very, very poignant, and it's very, very on the nose, but Rachel Harrison does it in a way where the concept of the cult is just so absurd and hysterical that you can't help but like love this book. I don't want to ruin what the cult is about, because that's kind of a little bit of a twist, maybe like a third of the way through the novel, and when it happens, like, I think I actually laughed out loud. And again, it's something that like, just, it's the way that she writes this concept. Any other horror author, I feel like, could have done it in a very, very scary way. She does it in such this kind of like strange, lighthearted and humorous way, but still containing all of these very macabre and dark topics, and it's just this amazing balance of horror and humor, and it is so well done. And I really don't like Vesper as a character. I think she's a pretty awful person, who's kind of had a lot of things handed to her, and she doesn't treat some of the people who are pretty kind to her in any way well. And yet, just reading this book, it was such a like adventure to get through it. And I love the way that they describe the cult. Vesper's family is very, very high up in the cult, so you get a lot of kind of what's happening behind closed doors moments, where like you get to see what the right hand people of the leader of the cult are kind of doing that maybe the smaller people don't see. And Vesper is right inside of it, and I just think it is absolutely fantastic, and I can't stop recommending Rachel Harrison, but I always have to give the caveat of like, you're probably not going to enjoy the characters that she writes about, yet you're going to really enjoy the ride reading about them. Okay, next up. This is Within These Walls by Anya Ahlborn. Would it be a book list by Violet Prynne if I didn't have like an Anya Ahlborn novel on here? Probably not. I love Anya Ahlborn, and I think this is my favorite depiction of cults in any horror novel I have ever read, ever, because it is so realistic. This book really gets into the mind of how people can fall into joining a cult, even if it's against their better judgment. I'm going to read the back of the book really quickly. In her all-new supernatural thriller, best-selling indie horror author Anya Ahlborn asks, how far would you go for success? What would you be capable of if the promise of forever was real? With his marriage on the rocks and his life in shambles, washed-up true crime writer Lucas Graham is desperate for a comeback, one more shot at the best-selling success he once enjoyed. His chance comes when he's promised exclusive access to death row inmate Jeffrey Halcombe, the notorious cult leader and mass murderer who's ready to break his silence after 30 years, and who contacted Lucas personally from his maximum security cell. With nothing left to lose, Lucas leaves New York to live and work from the scene of the crime. Split-level farmhouse on a gray sanded beach in Washington state, whose foundation is steeped in the blood of Halcombe's diviners, runaways who were drawn to his message of family, unity, and unconditional love. There, Lucas sets out to capture the real story of the departed faithful. Except that he's not alone. For Jeffrey Halcombe promised his devout eternal life, and within these walls, they're far from dead. What's so good about this story is it's told from two different perspectives, and two different time periods for the most part. You get the kind of inception of the cult, and how people are drawn into it and kind of become a part of it, and it's set, I believe, in like the 70s, so you get really that kind of, like, Manson family, Jim Jones kind of moment with that, where you kind of like really see like how and why these people are buying into these beliefs, and then you get like the nowadays looking back on it and kind of the haunting memory of how all of that happened influencing the people of today. And I just found this book absolutely fascinating. I found it very, very scary, very, very compelling. I didn't want to put it down. It's one of Anya Ahlborn's heftier books. It's just under 500 pages, and I think I read it in like 3 days because I just needed to know what was going on. But to me, it wasn't necessarily what the cult did or the climax of the story that made this book so chilling. It was how believable it was watching these people get sucked into this cult and how horrible the cult was to its members, and yet these people stayed and pursued through it. And it just felt so real and so tangible. And Anya Allborn is so good at writing real concepts alongside the supernatural, where the reality somehow becomes so much scarier than the supernatural. And yet in this book, the supernatural elements on top just elevate the horrors of reality in a really, really terrifying and kind of unnerving way, which I know can like describe like every horror novel, but that's the best way for me to describe what's happening in this novel without giving it away. But I was really, really blown away by it. This is a dark book. Anya Allborn does not write happy books. This is a very, very dark one. You won't have a warm, fuzzy, happy ending. But just the way that she writes about the subject matter, I thought was absolutely genius, and it felt real. And apart from, again, all of the supernatural elements, if that had been a very real cult in like the 1970s, I would have 100% believed it after having read this book. It just felt very, very real. She must have done so much research to figure out how to portray these characters the way that they did and to make them so charismatic and compelling while at the same time being so freaking evil and manipulative. It's a brilliant book. Okay, so I had to put Rosemary's Baby on the list because I just know that if it wasn't on the list, everybody would be like, Rosemary's Baby. Because yes, Rosemary's Baby, the ultimate cult book. I love this book. I've seen the movie before. I really always loved and enjoyed the movie. And then I read it a couple months ago because I was like, I love the film. I should probably, read the book. And it's fantastic. It's as great as everybody says. It's 100% worth the hype. I love this book. So I'm going to read the back of the book for you guys. I know I've talked about it a lot since I've read it, but hey, it's famous for a reason. Rosemary Woodhouse and her struggling actor husband Guy are thrilled to move into the Bramford, a sought-after Manhattan apartment building prized for its Victorian details and gargoyled facade. Yet as they learn of a darker side to the building's history and become acquainted with their overly attentive neighbors, the Castevets, unspoken tension enter into the young couple's relationship. Matters improve when Guy lands a major role, and Rosemary at last becomes pregnant. But as her pregnancy takes frightening turns, Rosemary begins to question if her neighbors' heightened interest is strictly innocent or if their motivations, and those of Guy himself, portend terrifying consequences for her and her unborn child. Is Rosemary going mad or going sane? What I love about this book is most of the cult stuff we don't really get fleshed out. It's very much implied from Rosemary's own experiences, and you kind of have to unravel what's going on with the cult from her own experiences. And this, I believe, is kind of the only book where you really don't get that in-depth look at actually being a part of the cult, but instead are a victim of the cult. And this being like the cult novel, too, I think that's a really, really interesting way to take it, because almost every book that I have on this list, you still somewhat get indoctrined into like being in the cult, or we're reading from members who escaped, or were in it from childbirth, or all of these different moments. But with this one, it really is just a victim of the cult kind of trying to assess how she is being used and manipulated, and I really, really loved that about this book. Rosemary is such a strong female lead. I talk about that quite often, but I think it's just a truly fantastic unraveling of the mystery when you're reading this. Like, anybody who's ever gone into this book blind, and like I envy you if you had that experience, like just the unraveling of what's going on to like the big reveal, I think is just truly so well crafted in the story. And even though most of us understand what this story is about, I feel like for those of us who maybe don't, or for those of us who are reading it for the first time, you really see how much time and care Ira Levine put into this novel to make it the absolute like famous gem that it is today. If you were looking for something similar to this, like I could have put Nestlings by Nat Cassidy on this book, but I don't necessarily think they're a cult. It is very much a tribute to Rosemary's Baby. I didn't love that book when I first read it, and the more I remove myself from that book, the more I find myself like looking more favorably on it. So I don't know. If you want something of a similar vibe, definitely check out Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. I'm just going to give that shout out there just because I have mixed feelings on that book. It's not really a cult, but it does really live up to the setting is also a character kind of vibe that Rosemary's Baby has, and really, really just pulls a lot of concepts from Rosemary's Baby to put into that book. Alright, last but not least, Last Days by Adam Neville. Now, I know I just went on this whole thing about like how Rosemary's Baby is really like We are not actually inside of the cult, we are kind of the victim looking in. This is a little bit more extreme than that. This is the story about people documenting the past of a cult and trying to uncover what happened years and years and years and years and years removed. You do get a couple survivors from it, but this is like a really cool kind of like documentary style approach to understanding cults. Now, I could have picked a lot of cult books from Adam Neville. It seems to be like what he really, really likes. The Ritual's got a little bit of it. The Reddening has a lot of it. Cunning Folk has a good hunk of it. But Last Days is probably his most famous cult book. So I'm going to read the back of this one. It's also, I think, my favorite of his cult books. I don't like the second half of The Ritual. When guerrilla documentary maker Kyle Freeman is asked to shoot a film on the notorious cult known as the Temple of the Last Days, it appears his prayers have been answered. The cult became a worldwide phenomenon in 1975 when there was a massacre including the death of its infamous leader, Sister Catherine. Kyle's brief is to explore the paranormal myths surrounding an organization that became a testament to paranoia, murderous rage, and occult rituals. The shoot's locations taken to the cult's first temple in London, an abandoned farm in France, and a derelict copper mine in Arizona's desert where the Temple of the Last Days met its bloody end. But when he interviews those involved in the case, those who haven't broken silence in decades, a series of uncanny events plagued the shoot. Troubling, out-of-body experiences, nocturnal visitations, the sudden demise of their interviewees, and the discovery of ghastly artifacts makes Kyle question what exactly it is the cult has awoken, as well as its interest in him. Adam Neville had like a time period before he wrote The Reddening where he was writing these really large, very scary, very almost cinematic style books, and I think that this is definitely one of them. No One Gets Out Alive is the other big one that I would like to point to, but this book has some scary, scary, scary scenes in it. When they're in that, when they go to the London apartment, which is like the initial headquarters of the cult, that scene, it's very long, and it is so atmospheric, and it is so terrifying, and at the same time, not that much is actually happening, and yet so much is happening, like below the surface and within like the minds of our lead characters, and it is so truly chilling. And that is why this book is so well done. This book is able to nail this concept of things that linger once the cult is gone. And it does so very much in a supernatural way as well as in like a kind of mentality way. And I just love how Adam Neville was able to take these kind of irrational fears of something being gone coming back to haunt you in a way that is so unexpected and so creative, and it's just really, really terrifying. There's some truly, truly scary, just standout scenes in this story, but I do think that when they go and visit the London flat, that could have been its own short story in itself, and it would have been just as chilling and unnerving as it is as the center point that launches this whole novel forward. This is a really, really strong book from Adam Neville from start to finish. So a lot of people say it's his scariest novel. I personally think No One Gets Out Alive is scarier, but this is definitely one of those books that like I would read it and I would get like just so uneasy and so uncomfortable reading some of the scenes and be like, I'm gonna put this down for a moment. So yes, the cult not necessarily is that interesting, I'll be completely honest, but like the way that these filmmakers are following what is happening with the cult and the way that the cult is responding back, such as like the escapees or those who are the survivors or whatnot, I find just so bone-chilling when you read this novel, and I just think it's one of the strongest things that Adam Neville has ever written, and I really, really love it, and I think it's a very, very unique way to approach the kind of cult topic. Anyway, those are my 5 cult books that I love and think you guys should all check out. Please let me know in the comments down below if you have any cult books that I haven't listed and should read. I know that there's another novel called Last Days that I also believe is about a cult. That has been like on my TBR forever, and I need to finally read it, so I do know about that one, but always looking for more. Anyways, that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, I try to post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays, and if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button down below, and I will catch you on the next one. Mwah!